The COVID-19 pandemic has shone the spotlight on the plight of migrant workers. They're among the hardest hit by anti-virus measures restricting movement, sending many into poverty. While here in South Korea, issues of harsh working conditions and discrimination have come to the forefront. June Street starts the day around 5 a.m. Toiling with her at the strawberry farm is her sister, as well as her South Korean husband who owns the farm. They're up early every day to make sure their strawberries make it to the supermarkets before they open. Soon, it is sunrise at Nonsan, located in the southern Chungcheong province, about 170 kilometers away from the capital Seoul. Junsuri and his sister are among many farm workers here who hail from Thailand. Foreign workers like them are increasingly a common sight on many South Korean farms in recent years, as it has become more difficult to hire locals for manual work, like picking strawberries.
현실적으로 지금 외국인 근로자분들이 없으면은 이제 딸기만 하더라도 지금 보시다시피 일일이 다 하나하나 손으로 하는 수작업인데 지금은 동남아분들이 오지 않으면은 현실적으로 많이 힘든 상황이에요.
But the fruit of the labor of migrant workers in South Korea is not always sweet. In December, South Koreans were shocked by the death of a 31-year-old Cambodian farm worker. Reports said Nguyen Sok-heng may have frozen to death on a sub-zero day inside a vinyl greenhouse she had been living in. I went to see where Nguyen Sok-heng lived in Pocheon, which is about 2 hours' drive from Seoul. Pastor Kim Dal-sung was my guide. He runs a migrant worker support center there. He's taking us to that place where the Cambodian worker died in December last year. After a short walk, we were there. The greenhouse, which was used as workers' living quarters when the incident happened, has been sealed off. She was found dead there one cold morning when temperatures fell to minus 18 degrees Celsius. The night before, other workers went to stay with friends because it was so cold. But she stayed behind. Autopsy showed she died of cirrhosis, which activists say was likely due to the harsh conditions she lived and worked in.
살인적인 노동입니다. 1년에 노동시간이 3,000시간이 넘어요. 우리나라의 근로자 1년 평균 노동시간이 뭐 한 2,100시간이고 유럽 같은 데는 한 1,200시간 되는데 살인적인 노동입니다. 봄부터 여름까지 한참 바쁠 때는 한 달에 하루도 휴일을 안 주는 것을 흔히 봅니다. 저는 늘 얘기합니다. 말하는 동물 정도로 본다. 예전 노동자들을.
Pastor Kim and other activists blame the country's employment permit system, so-called EPS, saying it enables employers to exploit migrant workers. Under the EPS system, workers can't change jobs without their employer's consent. Before the pandemic, there were close to 250,000 migrant workers in South Korea. More than 10% of them worked at farms and fisheries, which are not subject to government regulations on overtime and rest days. Apart from those who came here through legal means, there are also close to 400,000 undocumented workers in the country. We went around Pocheon looking for some of these migrant workers, hoping to find out what they know about the unfortunate death of the Cambodian colleague. I'm going to see if there's anybody here that I can talk to. 안녕하세요. I could hear voices, but no reply. Not surprising, as we heard that employers had told them not to speak to outsiders. Since the death of Nguyen Sok-heng, there has been a huge public outcry over the treatment of migrant workers. We went to another place and found 3 workers from Nepal who could speak some Korean too. They were willing to talk to us on the condition that we must not identify them because they were speaking to us without their employer's permission. They're 3 people from Nepal living here, and as you can see, the conditions are not that good, but to them, they say they're happy. They're earning about $1,800 per month, and they send back home most of it. He has been here for about 3 years now. He showed me his room, for which he pays about 100,000 won, about $89 per month.
매일 7시부터 5시까지 놀아요. 일요일이에요.
His 2 friends had a bigger room since they were sharing. Not too far away, we also ran into Asha, who has been working here for about 3 years now. She lives here with 4 others, including a friend who's also from Nepal. She says this place is fine even during the winter, that it's warm enough. She's going to show me her room. She said they knew about the death of the Cambodian worker from a nearby farm.
걱정해요. 이렇게 우리 이렇게 안 돼요. 상황 이렇게 걱정해요.
Migrant workers in South Korea are a workforce living in the shadows. To many South Koreans, they don't exist until the death of Nguyen Sok-heng made national headlines. These days, South Koreans are more willing to learn about the stories of the migrant workers among them. Pona is a Cambodian worker who's been working in South Korea for more than a year now. She recently ran away from an employer in Mirang, South Gyeongsang Province. Through a translator, a Cambodian married to a South Korean, Pona told me why she ran away. She was worried about her safety because she lived in a room with no lock and an outside toilet that had no rooftop. And she was living alone with her male employer. Pona wants to remain in South Korea because she's earning about $1,400 a month here, about 6 times what she made back home as a garment factory worker. She's here hoping Kim Il-chang can get her employer to pay for the extra hours she worked there. He's a trained lawyer who runs a non-governmental organization called People of the Earth Station in Ansan, a working-class city near Seoul. Just like these 3 Cambodians here.
여름이니까 이제 점심시간에 2시간을 쉬고 이렇게 하는데 일반적으로 노동 시간이 이렇게 좀 많아요. 휴일이 없고 원래는 그렇게 받아야 되는데 그래서 이제 저희가 문제 삼으려고 하는 게 그거죠. 너무 일을 시키니까 이제 사람들 혹사당하니까 그리고 그 작업장이 이렇게 허리를 반쯤 숙여서 하루에 15,000장 정도를 따야 돼요.
The death of Nguyen Sok-heng has led to criticism of South Korea's foreign worker policies. The government has promised reforms. It recently banned employers from using greenhouses as living quarters, although critics say it remains to be seen if the new rule will be strictly enforced. South Korea is one of the world's most racially and ethnically homogeneous countries. But with the world's lowest birth rate and a fast-aging population, multicultural families like that of strawberry farmer Kwak Ji-hyun and his Thai wife in Chungcheong Province are slowly gaining acceptance. It may be inevitable that government policies and the people will have to change and welcome these foreigners to South Korea.
Migrant labourers are the backbone of India's economy, but when a sudden COVID-19 lockdown was imposed last year and the country was plunged into recession, they suffered the most. Without any job security and with limited benefits available to them, many migrants fled the cities. A year later, and a lot of them have returned from their hometowns, but they're still struggling. Labourers Kamlesh and Ram were left without income when the workshop they make bangles for closed during India's strict lockdown. The 2 friends were struggling to get by, and they decided to flee Mumbai together. The trains had stopped, so they got on their bikes and travelled more than 1,600 kilometres to their home villages in the northern state of Uttar Pradesh. They managed to hitch a ride for part of it, but they cycled most of the way, and the arduous 2-week journey was made worse because both of them have disabilities. A childhood accident crippled Ram's leg, and Kamlesh had polio as a boy, which left his leg deformed.
रास्ते में जाने में तकलीफ हुई यहाँ से खंडा घाट अपना उसे हाल में कैसा अपन लोग उतर के भी निकाला खंडा घाट पे कोई भी चढ़ नहीं सकता है आगे निकलने गया वहाँ पे जहाँ भी मिलती गई कहीं कहीं खाना मिल जाता था कहीं कहीं कभी कभी एक दिन उपवास भी करना पड़ता था और मध्य प्रदेश में पहुँचा ऐसा धूप पड़ा ऐसा धूप में गर्मी में इतना तो हालत खराब हो जाती थी.
Growing up in poverty, it was hard for Kamlesh and Ram to access good health care, which they say is behind their disabilities. And as adults, the informal workers found themselves once again without a proper safety net. Before the pandemic, they were only earning about $160 a month.
लॉकडाउन में तो हमारा 10-12 हज़ार तो हो गया था लेने में लिया था अपने यार दोस्त से लिया था कर्जा उधारी लिया था मतलब हाँ वही चला रहे थे.
Ram says he received about $6 as a cash handout from the government, which was part of India's multi-billion-dollar economic stimulus package announced in April. And he accessed free food in his home state, but he couldn't avail of the benefits in Mumbai because his ration card was only valid in one location. Kamlesh, who has 3 daughters, says he didn't get any government help because supplies didn't reach his village. Things are still tough for the 2 workers. They came back to Mumbai, by train this time, once restrictions eased. But business isn't back to normal, and there's less work for them now, which means their meagre earnings have almost halved. They're not alone in their struggles. The pandemic laid bare just how vulnerable the migrant labourer population is, with many of them living a hand-to-mouth existence. According to the last census in 2011, there are 450 million Indian migrants in the country, as people move from one state to another in search of work. Millions of migrant labourers were plunged into a dire situation when India's lockdown last year was announced just hours before it came into effect. Left jobless, some walked hundreds of kilometres to return to their home villages, and some of them even died on the way.
We didn't make a note of this, that such a large number of migrant workers are moving from one place to other place. This came into limelight only during the pandemic, And see, unfortunately, what happens, all the migrant laborers, they work on an informal. Their informal means, they don't have a guarantee of employment. They don't have any appointment letter with them. They don't have that if there is no work, still they will be paid. If there is a work, they will be paid. There is no work, they will not be paid. There is no benefits like PF for ESI or pension or medical benefits.
Siaram Gautam tells me he's having a tough time because of this lack of benefits. He's from Uttar Pradesh and came to Mumbai 30 years ago to make a living. He has 6 daughters and is the family's breadwinner. For years, Siaram's been travelling into town every day to see if the small steel factories have any work for him for a daily wage of about $9. Once the pandemic hit, the factories closed for the lockdown. They've now reopened and he's back to his old routine, but often there isn't a job for him and he goes home empty-handed.
अभी कम हो गया काम अभी वही बोला 400-500 रुपये का काम होता है कईयों होता है कईयों नहीं होता रेगुलर हमारे नहीं रोज माल ही नहीं जाता है पूरी कंपनी जाम पड़ी है बोलते आगे जा ही नहीं रहा है तो काकरे बनवाएंगे.
He says that he managed to get free food supplied by the government, while local charitable organisations also helped. But with such a large family, he borrowed money to get them through the lockdown, and he's still in debt. Following the rise in fresh COVID-19 cases in India in recent weeks, the state of Maharashtra announced new restrictions, including a night curfew and a complete lockdown during the weekends. Some migrants have already left the cities for fear of being stranded again. The Indian government is working on a national action plan for migrant workers. The details of this are yet to be finalised, but the idea is that it will address the major challenges migrants face. In addition, the Labour Bureau plans to conduct a nationwide survey on migrant labourers. One of the problems exposed during the COVID-19 lockdown was that many workers are undocumented, which made it difficult for them to get state aid. And this has prompted the government to invest in building a database to register hundreds of millions of informal labourers who help keep the country's economy moving. In reaction to the problems exposed during the pandemic, the government has been implementing a One Nation, One Ration scheme, which allows migrant workers to claim their food ration benefits in any state. Labour code reforms that were long in the works were approved towards the end of last year and came into effect on the 1st of April. But experts say that these fall short and do not include a much-needed universal social security system.
So these people are from different states of India. They come here in Mumbai to search for a job.
John Sarkar runs an NGO which helps migrant labourers in this slum. He explains that because many of the workers are unskilled, their prospects are limited. He believes the deeper problems are best addressed by educating the next generation.
So the government should come up with a basic security in finance and food system, because these two are required for any human being to survive. So the ideal and the best, cheapest option is to train their children into vocational trainings.
He runs a school that teaches kids English and IT skills, but amid the pandemic, schools are still closed in Mumbai, and it means that labourers' children who can't easily access online classes are falling behind. Education may be a longer-term solution to lift people out of this cycle of poverty, but for migrant workers like Kamlesh and Ram, they're worse off financially compared to before the pandemic. The hope for them is that with the plight of migrant labourers fully exposed, steps being taken by the government will help to make their journey easier.
Every year, workers from Eastern Europe pour into Germany seeking a better life. But the dream can turn into a nightmare, with many migrant workers facing exploitation and mistreatment. The COVID-19 pandemic has only added to their woes.
The green fields of northwest Germany have long helped form the heart of the country's rich agricultural industry. It's here where vast profits are made every year in livestock farming, poultry, fruit and vegetables, all contributing hugely to the German economy. But unions say that beyond the picturesque landscapes hide some concerning workplace practices. Germany's multi-billion-dollar agribusiness industry relies heavily on help from Eastern Europe. Thousands of workers from places like Poland, Romania and Lithuania pour into Germany every year, seeking a better life. Many end up in the German meat processing industry. Yeva arrived in Germany from Lithuania almost 10 years ago. She's since left the meat industry, but her time inside slaughterhouses still weighs heavily on her.
It's really strange and terrible because your boss screaming on you, and I didn't like this.
Such work patterns can be an isolating experience. Workers often live together in shared dormitory-style housing, or even as seen here, in former military barracks. Without speaking German, many struggle to integrate into the local community. And even if they wanted to, some say the physical conditions leave them too exhausted.
Just I go home, I want to douche, and I want to put in bed to sleep or to stay just that. I can't feel my body. It was so, not so good.
Stories like these are not surprising for Guido Gruner. For more than 30 years, he's tried to help migrant workers who travel to Germany for seasonal farm jobs. He says the pressure on foreign workers is high.
The first German word they learn is schneller, 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 which means faster, faster, faster. Or the Romanian word gata, which means get ready, get ready, get ready. Or different other languages and the same words. That is what they learn because the pressure on the lines is very high.
The German government recently updated laws to make meat companies more accountable for the way migrant workers are treated. Previously, multiple subcontractors could engineer contracts that created distance between corporate management and workers. But that's now more difficult to do, with lawmakers wanting to see more accountability from big companies. Germany has also been a long-time supporter of the UN International Labour Organization, ratifying a number of conventions. Strong worker protections exist under state law as well, but some advocates say mistreatment can still occur when people are employed off the books and out of sight of the authorities.
Well, they say, okay, one worker made a mistake, so all the workers on the line
getting down the salary on that day, perhaps 20 euro. So at one point, no paid times when they are sick, no paid holidays, no paid overtime work. All those things and all those strategies make the work cheaper and cheaper and cheaper.
There have been reported cases where farms would keep the passports of the workers and not hand them back before they are done with the work.
Some advocates argue that the very nature of the European Union's free movement for workers system can leave people vulnerable to being exploited. In many cases, wealthy companies from Western Europe have access to a seemingly endless supply of cheaper, lower skilled labour from the eastern part of the continent. And while that's undoubtedly great for corporate profit margins and the economies of some member states, the COVID-19 pandemic has exposed how people can fall through the cracks, especially when they're working across multiple borders.
The questions being raised in recent months in Germany are also being asked elsewhere on the continent, with EU officials recently launching an investigation into the treatment of seasonal workers in southern Spain. Trade unions say word spreads quickly about poor working conditions at certain sites, forcing big companies to sometimes look further afield.
If the situation gets too bad, they won't come again. So what we see in agriculture, for example, many people from Romania told us last year we won't come again because it's too hard. So what we see then is that actually Germany tries to, or organizes now labor from Georgia, from outside the EU, getting workers who are ready to work for these tough conditions and for these low wages.
The COVID-19 pandemic has further deepened the woes of migrant workers.
There was a clear difference between let's say the occupational safety in times of Corona for German workers, where the standards increased, while for these workers even it became more difficult for them.
Those difficulties are still especially being felt in the meat sector. George Nesifor provides advice to Romanian slaughterhouse workers. He says their stories have, at times, left him upset at the way people from his country have been treated during the pandemic.
Basically, people who were infected were made as a group, and they were working as a group together. So for me, that was unbelievable that such a thing could happen.
So just for clarity, so you're saying that there were people sick with COVID who were told to keep working?
Yeah, they were brought to work in a team where all the people were infected.
Wow, okay.
That really shocked me.
Such stories are garnering more and more local media attention in Germany, and there are signs things are improving. But a representative for the meat processing industry in Lower Saxony was unavailable to answer several questions we put to them about the treatment of workers. Workers like Yeva say they just want fair and equitable treatment, regardless of which country they work in.
Ich denke erstmal, die müssen nicht Chefen. Ich denke, Chefs müssen nicht denken, dass du bist ein Mitarbeiter und du bist ein, weiß ich nicht, ein Arabisch.
A message that will likely be echoed by others who continue to come to Germany, hoping to cultivate and grow a brighter future.